Welcome to Archival Cover Letters and How We Write Them. My name is Dr. Zach Stein. I'm the Interim Assistant Dean of Technical Services at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. I'm also the Vice Chair and Chair-elect for the Society of Southwest Archivists Professional Development Committee. Today, on behalf of the Professional Development Committee, I'm honored to introduce today's presenter, Krista H. Hollis. She is the Assistant Archivist at the Memorial Collection in Houston, Texas. She's the chair of the FSA Ad Hoc Committee on Sustainability, member of the SSA Finance Committee, and sits on the board of the Archivists of the Houston area. She is a recent graduate of Louisiana State University's School of Information Science and has an MLIS and certificate of archival studies. She's very passionate about sustainability and cultural heritage, especially in arts organizations. And just a little bit about this workshop. Basically, job applications can be complicated, stressful, and tedious, but a strong application can set you apart in a competitive job market. Cover letters allow to show your personality during the application process, which is otherwise a cut and dry listing of the qualifications. So in this webinar, Ms. Hollis will delve into tips and tricks, formatting, how cover letters fit in with resume writing, and some pitfalls to avoid. So now I give it over to Ms. Krista Hollis.
Hey everyone. So I wanted to start by acknowledging that the greater Houston area, which is where I'm located, was the traditional territory of many indigenous peoples, including but not limited to the Karankawas, Coshada, Tonkawa, and Lipan Apache. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And I'm the Assistant Archivist at the Memorial Collection in Houston. So just a little bit of background about me and why I felt comfortable doing this presentation is I was recently hired here a few months ago, and when I was in my interview, I got a really nice compliment from our head of publishing, who said that my cover letters were really well written. I applied to 2 different positions at the institution and was interviewed for them at the same time. So I had to write 2 unique cover letters, knowing that the same people would be reading both cover letters. And then prior to this, I was a student supervisor for about 4 years, and I was constantly reading cover letters and resumes because we were constantly hiring students. And so I've read a lot of them. And I've also helped a lot of my friends write their cover letters and resumes throughout the years. So this is just some of the topics that we're going to cover today. Okay, so we're just going to jump right in. Cover letter basics. So I'm going to, throughout the presentation, kind of point out a few things that I really want you to take away from this workshop. And one of the most important things is that the top half of the page is going to be the most important. You just want to assume that whoever's reading your cover letter and your resume is only going to read the top half of the page. And if they're not intrigued by your application from what you present in the first part of it, then they're not going to read the rest of it. So you really need to make sure that that part is where you're getting the bulk of your information. And then also, if they ask for a cover letter and a resume, it should only be 1 page. So your cover letter should only be 1 page and your resume should only be 1 page. And I am going to talk a little bit about resumes throughout this as well, because they really, you have to do them at the same time. They coincide a lot. So what is a cover letter? Your cover letter elaborates on the key points in your resume, and it adds additional information. So as it said in the description for this workshop, your resume is pretty much just cut and dry. This is what your qualifications are, your skills, your experience. You don't really have a lot of room to describe what you've done or to show any sort of personality. So that is what you do in your cover letter. And then also your resume, it has to be chronological, and it has to be the most recent things. It has to be the most relevant to the job. So you can add some additional information in that cover letter that you wouldn't otherwise be able to represent in your application. Make sure though that when you're writing your cover letter, that it's not just a regurgitation of your resume. You don't want to have the exact same type of sentence structure or the same type of descriptions for the jobs that you're doing. You want it to be something that supplements your resume. You want to make sure that the reader is engaged and finds it worthwhile to read, because you don't want to waste their time, and you also don't want to waste your own time. That's going to be a common theme throughout. So make sure that the overlap is minimal and just the things that you really have to overlap on. So for instance, your most recent position, that title might be something that is repeated. Some basic skills or experiences, you might have some repetition there, but try to make sure it doesn't overlap too much. And that's why you want to write them at the same time. And then just briefly, your resume is not a CV. That's why it's one page. If it asks, if the job posting asks for a CV, that's where you can get into multiple pages and write more detail in every single thing that you've done. And then your cover letter is not the same thing as a diversity statement, a service statement, or a teaching statement. So if they ask for one of these types of statements, that's going to be different. And so this picture over here is just an example. I needed to have a picture of what like a really thick application would look like with multiple pages, and you don't want to do that. This is a pile of rejected applications, so don't make it super lengthy. One page. Okay, so we're gonna talk about how to format your cover letter. So throughout the presentation, I've taken my most recent cover letter and used it as an example throughout. So the first line should be the employer name, then their address, and then a greeting. And with cover letters, they are a formal document. So there's aspects of formal letter writing involved, but you kind of have to find a balance between being formal and being more approachable and digestible. So you just have to kind of find that balance as you're writing. To save a little bit of room, if you need an extra line on your paper, you can make the address all one line. And then I personally don't really like to use dear so-and-so in my letters. So I use good morning or good afternoon. It's a personal preference. I do think that to whom it may concern is a little bit too formal. So again, personal preference. And then I also just want to note, when you're applying for a job, I think it's a little bit ideal to apply either in the morning or in the afternoon, because if you apply after 5 p.m. and you have to say good evening in your cover letter, nobody's going to be reading that until the next morning or the next afternoon. So, and I also, this is just another personal preference, I think that it's a good idea to apply either before work hours or during your lunch hour, because if on your application you say that you have a full-time job currently while you're applying for this job, and you apply for a new position at 3 in the afternoon, then there's the possibility that whoever's reading your application could read into it that you are looking for other jobs while on company time. So another kind of common theme throughout this presentation is that you never really know who's reading your application, how formal they are, or how traditional they are. And so any sort of aspect of your application where you can err on the side of formality or on the side of showing respect to whoever your current employer is, or any sort of framing like that, you want to do that. And then if you want to put a date, you can. Formal letter writing would have a date. I usually don't, because it takes up an extra line that I can use to talk about my experiences. Okay. So basic format, your intro paragraph. Again, your first half of your page is the most important. So you want to get as much into that first paragraph as you can. This is where you hook in the reader and you get them engaged for the rest of the letter. So I always start out by putting the name of the position that I'm applying to. It's very common for applications to have cover letters that are just a template that's pulled off of Google and then filled in with the skills and qualifications of the applicant. And if you don't put the position in there, or rather, putting the position in there is just a way to subtly show that this cover letter is unique to this position. You didn't just decide to go and apply for a bunch of jobs and just litter the city with the same cover letter and resume. This one is specific to this position. So I always put that first. Then the next couple of sentences explain why you're interested in the position and why you're a good fit. So right away, you want to touch on some of the top skills and experiences that are listed in the job posting. What I usually do is I will highlight the entire job posting, copy and paste it into a Word document. And then as I am adding stuff to my cover letter and as I'm adding stuff to the resume, I will scratch out on the Word document the different skills that I have included. And then for what I add into the other one, so scratching out for the resume, and then for the cover letter, I will italicize them. That way you're not getting too much of an overlap and you're touching on every single thing that they want in the job posting. And so this is sort of, I have experience in, and then you put your skills and experience, and then talk about how you can back that up. If you have a former employer or a current employer that is worth name dropping, do it. You worked there, you can use that. And then I think it's also important to talk about why you're passionate about this position or this institution. Talk about why you actually want to be there on that team, because you have to write a whole page explaining that. So just, address it right away. And then if you do get an interview, you could have an entire day interview, multiple days of interviews. So you want to be able to talk about that for the entire time. When I was applying for this position, I had 3 rounds of interviews that were each about 3 to 4 hours each. So you have to be able to explain that entire time with those people why you care. So if you don't like where you're applying to, or you don't have any sort of passion for it, I would just recommend skipping applying for that job. So I have an example here from my cover letter. And I'm just going to go to the next slide because I have the same thing here. So this is the job posting right here. And you can see in my cover letter, this is my first paragraph of my cover letter, that I touch on all of these highlighted areas right here in these few sentences. So I also want to point out that not everything has to be a direct not everything has to be the exact wording. So, for instance, and I think it's on the next slide, some of the like preservation, if you do stuff like rehousing materials or other preservation activities, if they ask for preservation, you can, oops, sorry. If they ask for something like preservation, you could put other words that are preservation activities in there. So experience in museum setting, art history, studio art background is preferred. I talk about how I love art, how I'm passionate about art historical archival materials and their preservation. So yeah, you want to use the job posting to guide how you're writing this paragraph. So next one. And then same thing for your resume. So these are the different, this is the same job posting, and most of the things that are highlighted are different than what's on here. Some of them, there's a little bit of overlap again. But see, here we go, rehousing for preservation. I think I put imaging in my last slide for my first paragraph, or here we go, imaging, digitization, and then I also, for my most recent job that I had when I was applying for my current position, it wasn't necessarily a cultural heritage position. It was a corporate property management position. And ensuring insurance compliance, that is a transferable skill that aligns with, maintaining established policies and procedures. So again, it doesn't have to be the exact wording. Public facing representative, right? So one of the things that is in this particular job posting is facilitating research and access to internal and external users. So you can, understand that it doesn't have to be the exact same wording. And again, this is like the first half of my resume, and this is the first part of my cover letter. So you want to get the bulk of that information in right away to grab the reader's attention. Okay, so your second paragraph. Let me just make sure I addressed everything. Passion, enthusiastic, interview. Okay, second paragraph. So this is where you can talk about your most recent experiences related to the job posting and demonstrate why you're a good fit. This is also in the first half of the page, so you still want to be getting in as much of that language from the job posting as possible, and use that to guide you. So there's, an example from mine. I'm just going to move along. So paragraphs 3 and 4. This is where you can start talking about things that are a little bit further away from what your current position is. So I just want to say really quickly, if you've graduated from college, then you should have nothing from high school on your resume or your cover letter. And then the further that you get away from your undergraduate degree, the less that should be on your cover letter and resume. For the position I'm in right now, I didn't put anything on my resume from my undergraduate, except for the fact that I had that undergraduate. And I put one sentence at the very end of my cover letter about something that I did as an undergraduate student to show that I have a background in art history. And also in my cover letter for this current position, it wasn't until I got to paragraph 4, I believe, that I even started talking about the current position that I was in at the time of applying. So you don't have to be in chronological order with your cover letter. So just remember that you want to do what is most relevant to the job position and what shows the potential future employer that you are a fit. And then again, with those transferable skills, every job that you have is an opportunity to develop skills and move up. So even if you're doing something that isn't exactly what you want to do, try and identify what from that job you can apply to this new job that you're hoping to get. Okay, so this is paragraphs 3 and 4. Right, and here's paragraph 4. It's not until this paragraph that I even talk about my last job. I wanted to include this because, well, this part right here. In this position, I was an active member of the library's diversity advancement committee, right? And I talk about some of the stuff I did on that committee. The job posting had nothing about diversity or needing to be on committees. It didn't have anything about grant writing or programming, any sort of activities like that. So at this point in paragraph 3, you can really start to address items that you might not be on that posting, but you can read between the lines that that institution will eventually have some sort of opportunity to host programming. If it's an institution that is likely to need grant funding, you might be asked to write a grant at some point. And even if it's not on the posting, you can kind of, you know, see what skills you have in the past that would still be applicable in that job. So I would encourage you to do that. And then also know the mission of the place that you're applying to. What is their mission statement? What is their company culture? So if you are going to be applying for a job as an archivist at, you know, an energy company that is not, you know, pro sustainability, then, you know, maybe don't highlight that too much in your job. Or if you know that you're going to be applying for an archive that is at an institution with a history of being involved in the civil rights movement, and even if nothing about diversity, inclusion, anything like that is on the job posting, but they have this history, then you can, you know, use that in your application if you have that experience. So okay, again, transferable skills. So the job that I have right now did not have anything on the posting about accounts payable or receivable. It didn't have anything about budgets. Most people do have budgets within, you know, that they need to work. So you can kind of assume certain aspects of each job might have a transferable skill. So this is an example of that. And then the job posting, it wasn't near the top, but it did include about representing the institution at conferences. So even though my most recent job didn't have anything about cultural heritage involved with it, I did go to a conference. So I included that, and then I tie it back into something that is applicable to the current job that I was applying to. So try and bring it back around. If you address something that is not related to the job posting, try and bring it back to something that is applicable to the job posting and connect it that way. So, okay, so I think this is a slide that everybody can appreciate. It's some examples of common sentences. So I want to reiterate several times that you want to engage your reader and have something that doesn't bore them, and you want to be respectful of their time. So if they read the same sentence over and over again with, you know, a few different components changed, they're going to be bored, they're going to put it down and go to the next one. So if every single sentence starts with I am, I have, I did, etc., then that's not engaging. And then at the same time, during this time, at that time, it's, in that same type of sentence structure over and over again is also not engaging. And then I would also say if it's every other, then that's also not ideal. So if you have a sentence that starts, I am, and then the next sentence starts during this time, and then the next sentence starts, I did, and then the next sentence starts during that time, that's also not engaging. So try to keep it dynamic while you are writing, and use engaging sentence structure. So you do not want your interviewer to look like that, because that way it looks bored. So here are some examples of words to use in your cover letter and in your resume. Different variations of these words. And then I did get this list in part from the career services from Texas State. But I wanted to show that there's a lot of different ways to say the same thing. So, use the thesaurus and come up with some engaging sentence structure. Okay. And then your last paragraph of your cover letter is a little bit more formulaic. It is going to be just a few sentences. It's a little bit formal and to some extent a little bit boring. But when you're writing your cover letter, again, you have to find that balance between being leaning into the formality and being dynamic and different. So I, again, put the exact job title right there. It's another way to just reinforce that this letter is unique to this application. Same thing by putting the employer. Also, if you make a mistake and you are writing the same cover letter to lots of different people and you accidentally put the name of a different employer with that job title, then that is a red flag. So it shows that you're detail oriented by having this. And it's those sort of subtle cues that you have put in the effort that will kind of put you ahead. And again, it really depends on who's reading it. You never know who's going to read your cover letter. And then you put your phone number and email, and you want to say thank you and that you appreciate hearing from them. If they've made it to this part of your application, then they are considering you because they've read the entire page. So one thing that I forgot to mention in one of my earlier slides was I'm gonna just backtrack a little bit. It's like one of the first slides. Okay, so now that we've gone through the entire letter, I always just say good morning or good afternoon, and I don't put who I'm addressing it to. Sometimes on the job application, it will tell you who your supervisor will be. However, if you're applying for a faculty archivist position, a lot of times it's a committee that is looking at your application, and the person who would be your future supervisor is not necessarily the person who is reading your application right away. It might go first through HR, then to the supervisor, then to a committee. So if you make it specific to that person, that could become an issue. And then an example from my most recent job search was I applied to a position that was committee based for the hiring process. And I saw who the future supervisor would be. So I addressed it to that person and I said, oh, it was so great seeing you at SSA last year. And I said something that was very specific to that person, all professional, but it was not general enough for a committee. And I later found out that that person didn't even get, the committee was the main people viewing this application at first. So I would just be good morning, good afternoon, or whatever your preferred greeting is. So apologies that I didn't include that when I was going over this slide. Okay. Okay, and then finally, I do think it's ideal to sign your letters. If you don't, it's not a big deal, but it does show a little bit of more detail-oriented skill or attention to detail. And so I would say what's best is to just take a picture of your signature, edit it so it's just black and white, and then put that into the Word document that you're working in instead of printing out your entire resume, or sorry, your entire cover letter and then signing it and scanning it back in. I think this is the path of least resistance. And if anybody has any questions on how to do that, you can feel free to email me. But I think that that's the fastest way to do it. And then you just have your signature ready for every single cover letter that you put together. Okay, some tips and tricks. So a lot of job applications will say, please submit your cover letter in either a Word document or PDF. And then sometimes they'll give you some other options. I would recommend always doing a PDF, because when you have a Word document, if you want somebody opens it on a different edition of Word, or let's say they open it in Google Docs or anything like that, the formatting can get all messed up, and it's not you never know who is reading your application. So it's not necessarily clear to that person that it's the computer's fault for the formatting being messed up. They're just seeing a cover letter where it is all over the place. So a PDF prevents that from happening. Export it to a PDF every single time. I always use Times New Roman. This is also just a personal preference. The person who's reading it might not notice at all, or they might be more formal and think, oh, this should be in Times New Roman. However, I would recommend that whatever font you use, make sure your cover letter and your resume are the same font, and that it is the same font size. So ideally, you would use 12-point font, but if you are having trouble fitting everything onto one page, you can go a little bit smaller than 12-point. 11.72 is not going to be noticeable. 11-point might be. So it all depends also on who's reading your application. So if somebody prints out all of the applications that are in their top list, and they notice that your application has a much smaller font than everybody else's, then you might stand out in a way that is not positive. So any tiny little thing that gives you a competitive edge, even if it does seem a little bit ridiculous, I would just take advantage of that, because the job market can be really competitive. So you want to have that edge. To get everything on the page, you can play around with spacing, formatting, the margins. On my resume, I will usually put the top part of my resume with my name and my email address and my phone number in the header. And that saves just like a little bit of space, and that allows me to get a little bit more information on my resume without making it look over cluttered. So, but again, never go onto a second page with your resume or your cover letter. So this space right here is 3-point font. You can go into your paragraph and you can change the spacing before and after. And sometimes I will do that, but sometimes I also find that it's easier to just 77006 enter, good morning, and then highlight this and make it 3-point font. So sorry. Yeah, and then my indent right here, I went and I changed that to 0.25. So that gave me a little bit of extra room. Sometimes you'll write your paragraph, you have exactly how you wanted it to be worded, and it just is one word on the next line. And you might be able to get that extra line savings by making your indent a little bit smaller. And then again, in your paragraph settings, you can also change the spacing before and after. So I highly recommend taking advantage of these features. So some tips and tricks for writing. And I've mentioned some of these already. So your cover letter does not have to be in chronological order. Your resume should be in chronological order, but your cover letter doesn't. And again, your cover letter is elaborating on things from your resume and adding additional information that isn't on your resume. So just keep that in mind. I know I already said this as well, but I also just want to hit home and make sure everybody knows, don't use a template. So if somebody is applying or somebody's reading tons and tons of resumes and cover letters, they will notice who's using a template that they just grabbed off of Google. And this is a little bit of a hyperbolic example, but I have a close friend of mine who is in recruiting and they read tons of cover letters and resume. It's the majority of what they do. And then they send them on to different people within their company. And when they have a stack of 300 applicants and those, and most of them have the same qualifications and skills, and they see the same sentence structure at the end of each cover letter intro paragraph, or on the third paragraph they see the same sentence structure over and over again, they just throw those away. They don't even read the cover letter or the resume because they see that the person hasn't taken the time to pay attention to detail and make a unique cover letter or resume for that posting. So don't rely on templates. If you do use a template, make sure to go in and customize it and make it fit for your application. Read everything out loud. Do it twice. You catch mistakes. You catch where you need a comma. You catch that you have a run-on sentence. You will see that you accidentally use the wrong form of the word your, or various things like that. So read it out loud. Run it through Grammarly or another website similar to Grammarly. You don't have to do everything that Grammarly suggests. Sometimes Grammarly will take out the personality from the sentence. Sometimes a sentence that is maybe a little bit less clear than, sometimes you don't want a sentence that is as concise as it can be. Sometimes you want that detail in a sentence. So you don't always have to take the recommendations of Grammarly, but I would recommend running it through there. It'll catch things that you might not catch. And then I've already said this before, but the thesaurus is your friend. If you can't find a good synonym using thesaurus.com or the Merriam-Webster version of thesaurus or the suggested synonyms within your word processing software, then Google synonym to, and then whatever word you're trying to get a synonym for. Sometimes you can also do that with phrases, right? So if you want to find, you have like 3 words that you're trying to find a more concise way to say using a synonym, then Google it. And then this is also important. When you're writing your cover letter, use an active voice, so not a passive voice. And then you're writing in first person. I feel like that should be obvious, but you never know. So write in first person. Never disparage a former employer in your cover letter or your resume. You should only ever be positive. If you had a job where nobody has anything nice to say about you, that bridge is burned or something, and you need to have it on your resume still, don't say anything negative about them. You don't have to put that job as one of your references. Only say positive things. It's how you frame yourself. You never want to be negative during the application process, if you can help it. And then this is a big, big thing. I want everybody to remember this. Do your research before you apply to the job, before you do an interview. Know what the potential employer is all about. What is their mission statement? What is their company culture? Know exactly what the job is that you're applying to, right? If you have a digitization background and the job application is looking for somebody who does digital preservation, if you don't have that experience, those are two different things. So be aware of what the jobs you're applying to are. And then if you can, do a little bit of background on the people who will be interviewing you. Who is in that department? Do they have a public social media? Do they have lectures on YouTube? If you actually get towards the interview process and you know who you're going to be interviewing with, or you can have an idea of who you're going to be interviewing with, go and look at the website, go and look at the social media for the institution, go and look at the LinkedIn for the people that you're going to be applying with. Know what it is that they are interested in, what the goals of that department is. That's big. Also, if you are applying to work at a public university that's overseen by the state that you're in, be aware of that. What type of implications does that have? If there is issues with the budget for that state, is there hiring freeze? Is there changes to how the budget works? If you're working for a nonprofit or a corporation, how does that impact that job position? So try and do your research on that. That's really important. In your cover letter and in your resume, but we're talking about cover letters, don't talk about salary. You can at the interview, if they bring up salary, you can talk about salary. But in the cover letter, you shouldn't be talking about salary. You should be talking about your skills, experiences, and elaborating on your resume and adding information that is not there. So don't talk about that. With the marital status, children, and religious preference, there are laws about that. It's ideal to just not bring up those things, both in your interview and in your cover letter application. If you open the door to talking about those aspects of your personal life, it opens a gray area. So I would just recommend steering clear of it. Again, your cover letter is elaborating on your resume, and your marital status, having children or not having children, and your religious preference don't apply. Now, caveat to that, if you are applying to, or I guess exception is, if you're applying to a religious organization that requires that you are part of that religion, and it says so in the job posting, then you could say that you are a part of that religion. But if it doesn't say anything like that in the job posting, I would just not bring it up. Okay, some additional tips and tricks that are beyond the cover letter. So again, all of these things go together. You should be writing your resume and your cover letter at the same time, because they're going to be read at the same time. So your resume should be the position that you currently have, whether that is a volunteer position or a paid position, that portion of your cover or of your resume should be written in the present tense. So I process X. I arrange X, etc. And your former positions are in the past tense. I processed, I digitized. So, and then if you get an interview, I always write thank you notes. I think that it's really important when you're writing thank you notes, especially if you're interviewing with a committee of people, some of whom work in the same office with each other. Each one of those thank you notes should be different. They should not be formulaic and the exact same thing to everybody. You don't want to waste anybody's time, including yourself. Write a thank you note that is worthwhile. It doesn't have to be long either. And there's lots of videos online about how to write a professional thank you note. Again, don't just use a template. You could use those as a frame of reference, but write a thank you note that's unique. Just like your cover letters, they should all be unique. When you go to an interview, I always like to bring a portfolio. You can keep extra copies of your cover letter and your resume in the portfolio. You can take notes. You can have a couple of questions that might be a little bit harder to remember written down in the portfolio. And then this is a big one, be early. And that's not just for an interview, that's also for your application. So if you are job hunting and you're looking on the same job boards and you're looking at the same institutions and what their hiring board on for like, whichever university or museum, et cetera, that you're looking at, if they post a job, try to apply for that job as soon as you can. Sometimes jobs close pretty quickly. And also, if it says on the job posting what day it's going to close, don't apply for that job 11 p.m. the night that it's going to close, right? Because sometimes people see those timestamps and it's, anything that you can do to give yourself a cutting edge in a competitive market, including looking like you're punctual, is going to be an advantage. And it might not be advantage. The person who's reading it might not care. But then again, they might. So just be early anytime you can. And for an interview, get there way early, super early, and then sit in a parking lot for a restaurant across the street or, down the street, go do something. But make sure that you're early. I like to be there ready to tell the person at the front desk that I'm there 15 minutes in advance. So I will get there an hour early because in Houston, you never know with traffic. So you plan to get there an hour early and then you get there 20 minutes early, so be early, bring a book, bring some other work to do. And then for your interview, have a lot of questions at the ready. So I just want to remind everybody that when you're applying for a job and you make it to the interview stage, they're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them. So you want to make sure that you have questions that gauge what type of employer this is going to be. Pay attention to the questions that they ask you as well, because if they are asking you questions like, what's your tolerance for bad behavior at work, or a more professional version of that question, and a whole series of questions that are like that, that might be something to take note of. While you're interviewing, try and make it conversational. So if they ask you a question and it kind of touches on one of the questions that you had already planned to ask them that question as you're answering, right? Answer their question and then put it back on them and ask them a question. It also makes the interview process more engaging so that the person who's interviewing you doesn't feel like they are, going through an awful experience, because a lot of people don't really like to interview just as much as they don't like to be interviewed. So make it conversational, and then have questions that are not just generic. You can go online and you can find, 500 questions that you should know to ask at an interview, and they're generic for every single industry. Have some questions that are specific to the position that you are applying to and to the institution or the employer, to that department, to the discipline as a whole. And then also have something that is not work related that you can bring up that is work safe. When I applied for this job, I had to go on a pretty lengthy walk for an interview from one side of the building to the other side of the building to get to the actual interview. And we had to do some small talk in between. So, something that is happening around town that's local, that's positive. I talked with our wonderful head of HR about a recent fundraising event that happened for the Houston Ballet. And we talked about that on this little walk. I went and I saw my future or my current bosses, but at the time, my future boss had a public Instagram, and she posted about cats, and I love cats. So, we gabbed a little bit about cats. So, and then, you can also talk about work things, but have something that's light to talk about in case such a scenario happens. And then if you're doing like a whole day of interviews, which is not uncommon for a faculty position, especially at a university, if you're going from place to place to place and people are escorting you, have some stuff that you can talk about that is engaging for that person. Because interviews and application processes, cover letters, resumes, all of it is very subjective. So you have to understand that and kind of, again, balance formality and being a relatable human person that is not a robot. Okay, so major takeaways. Don't forget these things. The top half of the page for your cover letter and for your resume is the most important. Everything everything that you want them to know should be right there, and that will get them to read the rest of the page, right? Not that the second half of the page is not important, but this part of the page is the hook. And it should be one page. Cover letter one page, resume one page. That are PDFs. Demonstrate passion, interest for the position, the institution, the discipline, right? If somebody asks you why you want to be an archivist and you're just like, I don't know, I need a job, like, that's not good. I mean, I feel like that's obvious, but yeah, be able to talk about why you chose to be an archivist, why you chose to apply for this position, why you love rare books, why you love preservation, etc. And then avoid being too repetitive in your writing. You shouldn't be regurgitating your resume. You shouldn't have I did, I was, I am, I have at the beginning of each sentence. You need to have a dynamic sentence structure, and you need to have a resume and a cover letter that complement each other. Always use spell check and run your cover letter and your resume through a resource like Grammarly. And then research, research, research. Okay. That's it.